The morning sun peeked through the luxurious penthouse windows as Robert Chen stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 35, he had everything money could buy: a successful tech company worth billions, a beautiful home overlooking the city, and a lifestyle most people only dreamed about. Yet something felt empty inside him, a void that even his tremendous success couldn't fill. His wife, Lily, was still asleep in their king-size bed. They hadn't really talked in months, not beyond the surface-level conversations about schedules and social events. The distance between them had grown wider with each passing day, like a slowly expanding canyon that neither of them knew how to bridge. Robert straightened his designer tie and grabbed his briefcase. The weight of the divorce papers inside felt heavier than usual. He had been carrying them around for weeks, unable to find the right moment, or perhaps the courage, to bring them out. That morning started like any other at Chen Technologies. Robert walked through the glass doors of his company's headquarters, nodding at employees who scrambled to look busy as he passed. In the elevator ride to the top floor, he thought about how different his life had become from 10 years ago when he was just another programmer with a dream. The meeting with his lawyers went exactly as planned. Everything was in order: the papers, the settlement, the division of assets. Robert had always been generous, and this situation was no different. He made sure Lily would be more than comfortable for the rest of her life. But money, he had learned, couldn't fix everything. When he finally returned home that evening, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily was sitting in their living room, looking out at the city below. She seemed different somehow. There was a glow about her that he hadn't noticed in the morning, but Robert was too preoccupied with his own thoughts to dwell on it. "We need to talk," he said, placing his briefcase on the coffee table. The words felt dry in his mouth. Lily turned to face him, her dark eyes meeting his. She didn't seem surprised. Perhaps she had seen this coming too. "Yes, we do," she replied quietly. Robert pulled out the papers and placed them gently on the table between them. "I think we both know this isn't working anymore," he began, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "We've grown apart, and I need to focus on expanding the company. We're about to enter new markets, and I can't." He trailed off, realizing how hollow his excuses sounded. The truth was more complicated. They had married young, when his company was just starting to take off. Back then, they shared the same dreams, the same excitement for the future. But somewhere along the way, as his empire grew, their connection had withered. Lily picked up the papers with trembling hands but maintained her composure. She had always been strong that way. As she flipped through the pages, Robert noticed her free hand rest briefly on her stomach, but the gesture was so quick he thought he might have imagined it. "You're being very generous," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the least I can do," Robert replied. "You've been there from the beginning. You deserve it." The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and quiet agreements about who would keep what. Their divorce would be amicable, no dramatic courtroom battles, no ugly fights over assets. Just two people acknowledging that their paths had diverged. As Robert watched Lily pack her essential items that night, he felt a strange mix of relief and regret. She moved through their shared space with quiet dignity, taking only what she needed for the immediate future. The rest would be dealt with later. Before she left, Lily paused at the door. For a moment, it seemed like she wanted to say something important. She opened her mouth slightly, then closed it again, as if thinking better of it. Instead, she simply said, "Goodbye, Robert. I hope you find what you're looking for." The door closed behind her with a soft click, and Robert was left alone in his massive penthouse. He walked to the window and watched as Lily's car disappeared into the city traffic below. He had everything he thought he wanted: freedom to focus entirely on his empire, no more guilty feelings about neglecting his marriage, no more awkward silences over dinner. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Lily had just discovered something that would change both their lives forever. As she drove away from their shared life, she carried not only her belongings, but also a secret that would remain hidden for years to come. She was expecting not one, but 4 new lives, all carrying Robert's DNA. The city lights twinkled below as night fell, and Robert stood at his window, feeling like he was on top of the world. Yet somehow he had never felt more alone. Little did he know that this ending was actually just the beginning of an extraordinary story that would unfold over the next 12 years. 12 years can change everything. While Robert Chen's face appeared on magazine covers and his company dominated headlines, Lily built a completely different life on the other side of the country. She had chosen Portland, Oregon, about as far from New York's gleaming skyscrapers as she could get while still staying in a city with good schools and medical facilities. The small 3-bedroom house she bought with a portion of her settlement money wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love and laughter. The walls were covered with children's artwork, science fair ribbons, and family photos. 4 bicycles of different sizes leaned against the garage wall, and a vegetable garden flourished in the backyard, a project the kids had started 3 summers ago. This particular morning was like any other in the Chenwu household. Lily stood in the kitchen, packing 4 different lunches while calling upstairs, 10 minutes until we leave for school. The thunder of footsteps down the stairs announced the arrival of her 12-year-old quadruplets. First came Emmy, her long dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail, already dressed in her school uniform with her backpack perfectly organized. Then David and Daniel tumbled down together, identical in looks but opposite in personality. David was still trying to finish his math homework while walking, while Daniel was enthusiastically explaining his latest computer program idea. Finally, Peter appeared, quiet and thoughtful as always, nose buried in a book about renewable energy. "Mom, can you check my science project presentation?" Emmy asked, pulling out her tablet. "I made some changes last night." After breakfast, Lily replied, sliding plates of scrambled eggs and toast across the counter. "Everyone needs to eat first." "David, that homework should have been done yesterday." "I know, Mom, but I had this really cool idea for our joint project and lost track of time," David mumbled through a mouthful of toast. The joint project. Lily's heart skipped a beat whenever they mentioned it. Her 4 brilliant children had combined their talents to create something extraordinary, a sustainable energy system that could power small communities using a combination of solar, wind, and kinetic energy. It was exactly the kind of thing their father would have created, though they had no idea. As she watched them eat and chatter, Lily saw pieces of Robert in each of them. Emmy had his determination and leadership skills. David inherited his creativity and ability to think outside the box. Daniel got his technical brilliance and coding abilities. And Peter had his quiet intensity and vision for making the world better. They all shared his sharp cheekbones and intelligent dark eyes, though they had Lily's gentle smile. She had never told them about their father, beyond saying that he was a businessman who had chosen a different path. They didn't know that their dad was the famous Robert Chen, whose technology they used every day. She protected them from that truth, wanting them to grow up normal, to achieve things on their own merit. Lily worked as a high school science teacher, a job she loved and that allowed her to be present for her children. The substantial divorce settlement remained mostly untouched in a trust fund, growing steadily for the children's future. She had made sure they lived comfortably but modestly, teaching them the value of hard work and perseverance. "Mom, we're going to win the national science competition," Daniel declared confidently as he helped clear the breakfast dishes. "Our project is going to change the world." Lily smiled, but her stomach churned slightly. The competition was in San Francisco next month. She had seen the list of judges, and Robert's name was among them. She hadn't told the kids yet, hoping against hope that something would come up and he would be replaced by another judge. "Remember, it's not about winning," she said, straightening Peter's collar. "It's about doing your best and learning from the experience." "But we're definitely going to win," David grinned, finally closing his math notebook. "We've been working on this forever." The kids didn't know that their project was remarkably similar to one of their father's early inventions, the one that had first put him on the path to success. It was in their blood, this drive to innovate and create. As they piled into their modest SUV for the school run, Lily caught herself wondering what Robert would think if he knew about them. Would he be proud? Would he regret his choice to leave? She pushed these thoughts away, as she had done countless times over the years. She had made her choice too, to give her children a normal, loving childhood, free from the complications of their father's wealth and fame. The school day passed quickly, as it always did. Lily taught her classes while her children excelled in theirs. After school, They had their various activities: Amy's debate club, the twins' programming class, and Peter's environmental science group. Their lives had a comfortable rhythm, a harmony that Lily had worked hard to create and maintain. That evening, as she helped them refine their presentation for the upcoming competition, Lily couldn't help but feel both proud and anxious. They were so much like their father, brilliant, driven, and passionate about making a difference. Yet they had grown up with something Robert had lost along the way: the understanding that success wasn't just about individual achievement, but about working together and supporting each other. As she tucked them into bed that night, though they insisted they were too old for tucking in, Lily wondered if she had made the right choice all those years ago. But seeing their peaceful, happy faces, she knew she had. They were growing into amazing people, not because of their father's billions, but because of their own hard work and the love that surrounded them. What she didn't know was that their carefully constructed world was about to change. In just a few weeks, their paths would cross with Robert's in a way none of them could have predicted, and the truth that she had protected for so long would finally come to light. The San Francisco Convention Center buzzed with excitement as young scientists from across the country set up their projects. Banners hung from the ceiling announcing the National Youth Science Competition, and nervous parents helped their children make last-minute adjustments to their displays. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she helped her 4 children arrange their presentation booth. Their project, titled Community Power, a sustainable energy solution, stood out with its working model of a miniature power grid. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation, late-night adjustments, and practice presentations. "Mom, you're more nervous than we are," Amy said, straightening the project banner for the 10th time. "We've got this." Peter was quietly reviewing their presentation notes, while David and Daniel made final tweaks to their demonstration model. The twins worked in perfect sync, their matching faces wearing identical expressions of concentration. "I know you do," Lily smiled, trying to hide her anxiety. She had spotted Robert's name on today's schedule. He would be judging the final round. After 12 years, she was about to watch her children present their invention to their father, though none of them knew it. The preliminary rounds went smoothly. The quadruplets worked as a seamless team, each taking their part in the presentation. Amy handled the introduction and market analysis, the twins explained the technical aspects, and Peter covered the environmental impact. They advanced through each round, impressing judge after judge. Meanwhile, in another part of the convention center, Robert Chen was reviewing his schedule for the day. At 47, he looked distinguished rather than older, his success evident in his confident bearing and perfectly tailored suit. He had judged many competitions over the years, but something about this one felt different. Mr. Chen, his assistant, approached with a tablet. "The finalists have been selected. There's a remarkable project by 4 siblings that everyone's talking about." Robert nodded absently, his mind already on the acquisition deal he needed to close next week. He had almost skipped this competition, but his PR team insisted it would be good publicity. The billionaire tech genius inspiring the next generation. The final round began in the main auditorium. Robert sat with the other judges, half listening as the first few groups presented. But when the 4 siblings walked onto the stage, something made him sit up straight. There was something familiar about them, something he couldn't quite place. "Good afternoon, distinguished judges," Amy began confidently. "We are the Chen Wu siblings, and we're here to present our solution for sustainable community power." Robert's heart skipped a beat at the name, but he quickly dismissed it as a coincidence. Chen was a common surname after all. Yet as the presentation continued, he found himself unable to look away. The way David gestured as he explained their innovation, it was exactly how Robert himself moved when excited about an idea. Daniel's method of breaking down complex concepts was eerily familiar. Peter's quiet intensity reminded him of himself at that age. The siblings demonstrated their working model, showing how their system could power a small community using a combination of solar, wind, and kinetic energy. It was brilliant in its simplicity, yet sophisticated in its execution. More than that, it was remarkably similar to Robert's first major innovation, the one that had launched his company. As he watched them, details began to jump out at him. The sharp angle of their cheekbones, the way Amy's eyes crinkled when she smiled, the twins' synchronized movements, Peter's thoughtful pauses before answering questions. These children, all roughly 12 years old, looked exactly like he had at their age. In the audience, Lily held her breath. She could see the moment recognition began to dawn on Robert's face. She watched as he leaned forward in his chair, his eyes moving from one child to another, connecting dots she had kept hidden for so long. The presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause. The other judges were clearly impressed, but Robert barely noticed. His mind was racing, calculating dates, remembering his last days with Lily. Could it be possible? 4 children who looked just like him, who'd thought just like him, presenting an invention that mirrored his own early work. During the judges' deliberation, Robert couldn't focus on the scoring sheets in front of him. He kept thinking about Lily's last day in their penthouse, that brief moment when she had seemed about to tell him something. He remembered her hand touching her stomach, a gesture he had dismissed at the time. The winners would be announced in an hour. Robert excused himself from the judges' room and walked through the convention center, looking for the Chen Wu family's booth. He found it empty, but a familiar figure stood nearby, packing up equipment. Lily sensed his presence before she saw him. She straightened up slowly and turned around, facing the man she hadn't seen in 12 years. Their eyes met, and the busy convention center seemed to fade away. "They're mine, aren't they?" Robert's voice was barely a whisper. Before Lily could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. The 4 siblings were returning to their booth, still buzzing with post-presentation excitement. They stopped short when they saw their mother talking to one of the judges. In that moment, standing face to face with 4 young versions of himself, Robert Chen, the billionaire who thought he had everything, realized just how much he had walked away from 12 years ago. Time seemed to stand still in that moment at the science fair. The bustling convention center faded into background noise as Robert stared at the 4 children, his children, while they looked back at him with curious expressions. None of them understood yet why this well-dressed judge was looking at them as if he'd seen a ghost. "Mom." Annie stepped forward, naturally taking the lead as she always did. "Is everything okay?" Lily's mind raced. This wasn't how she had planned for them to find out. She had imagined a quiet family dinner, a carefully prepared explanation. Not here, not now, not like this. "Your presentation was extraordinary," Robert said, his voice slightly unsteady. He couldn't take his eyes off them. Every movement, every expression was like looking into a mirror of his past. "The way you integrated the kinetic energy conversion, it's brilliant." "Thank you, sir," Daniel replied enthusiastically. "We'd actually got the idea from studying some early renewable energy patterns. There was this amazing invention from 12 years ago that I created," Robert finished softly. The twins' eyes widened in recognition. "You're Robert Chen?" David's voice cracked with excitement. "The Robert Chen? Your early work on sustainable energy systems is what inspired our whole project." Peter, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. "That's why you look so familiar. Your picture is in our science textbook." He paused, his analytical mind working quickly. "And in Mom's old photo album." The air grew thick with unspoken questions. Lily knew she couldn't protect them from the truth any longer. "Kids," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "we need to have a family discussion, but this isn't the right place." "There's a private conference room down the hall," Robert offered, then looked at Lily questioningly. "If that's okay." Lily nodded slowly. As they walked to the conference room, she noticed how the children unconsciously matched Robert's stride. They had inherited not just his looks, but his way of moving through the world. The conference room was quiet and comfortable, with large windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. The children sat together on one side of the table, while Lily and Robert took seats opposite them. The silence stretched for a moment, heavy with 12 years of secrets. "I don't know how to say this easily," Lily began, looking at her children's expectant faces, "but Mr. Chen isn't just a judge today. He's your father." The room erupted in a chaos of reactions. Annie gasped, her hand covering her mouth. David and Daniel started talking at once, their words tumbling over each other. Peter sat completely still, his face unreadable. "But you said our father was a businessman who chose a different path," Emmy said, her voice trembling slightly. "He is," Lily replied softly. "I just didn't tell you which business." "Why didn't you tell us?" David demanded, looking between his mother and Robert. We've been using his patents as references for our project. We've read about his company in the news all this time." "I made that choice," Lily said firmly, protecting Robert from their anger. "I wanted you to grow up without the pressure of his name, to achieve things on your own merit. And look what you've done. You made it to the finals of this competition because of your own hard work." Robert cleared his throat. "I didn't know," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't know about any of you. If I had." "Would it have made a difference?" Peter asked quietly, speaking for the first time since the revelation. His question hung in the air, heavy with 12 years of absence. Robert looked at his youngest son, so serious, so much like himself, and felt the weight of all the moments he had missed. "It would have made all the difference," he answered honestly. "I was focused on building something big, something important. I never imagined I was missing something even bigger." Daniel, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Our project, it's really similar to your first invention, isn't it? We didn't copy it, we just thought the same way." "Because you are your father's children," Lily said gently. "You inherited his brilliance, his way of seeing problems and solutions, but you've made it your own. Your project isn't just his influence, it's all of you working together, supporting each other, making something new." The children sat with this information, each processing it in their own way. Annie looked thoughtful, already planning how this would change their lives. The twins exchanged glances, having one of their silent conversations. Peter continued to study Robert, as if memorizing every detail. "What happens now?" Emmy asked, always practical. Robert looked at Lily, then at each of his children. "That's up to all of you," he said carefully. "I know I haven't earned the right to be in your lives. But if you're willing to give me a chance, I'd like to get to know you. Not as Robert Chen the billionaire, but as your father." "We should head back," Lily said, checking her watch. "They'll be announcing the winners soon." As they stood to leave, Peter suddenly asked, "Did you really not know about us all this time?" Robert met his son's searching gaze. "No, I didn't. And that will be my biggest regret for the rest of my life." They walked back to the main auditorium together, this newly revealed family, each lost in their own thoughts. The winner announcement was minutes away, but somehow it didn't seem as important anymore. They had all just won and lost something much bigger than any competition could offer. They had found their truth, and now they had to figure out what to do with it. The days following the science competition were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. The Chen Wu siblings had won first place, but that victory felt small compared to the life-changing discovery they'd made. Back home in Portland, the family tried to settle into their new reality. The kitchen table, usually a place for homework and family dinners, had become the center of their most important conversations. One evening, as Lily prepared dinner, she watched her children sorting through a stack of old magazines and newspapers Robert had sent them, all featuring stories about their father's life and work. "He started coding when he was even younger than we are," Daniel said, pointing to an article. His eyes lit up with recognition. "That's exactly how I learned too." David leaned over his twin's shoulder. "Look at this picture of his first office. It was just a tiny garage with 2 computers. Now his company takes up 3 city blocks in New York." Amby sat quietly, making notes in her journal. She had started documenting everything they learned about their father, trying to piece together the puzzle of their shared history. Peter, meanwhile, was focused on a scientific paper Robert had published years ago, the one that had inspired their winning project without them even knowing it. "Mom," Amy looked up from her journal, "why didn't you ever use the money he left you? We could have had a bigger house, better things." Lily turned away from the stove to face her children. "Because I wanted you to understand that success isn't about what you have, but who you are. Look at what you've achieved on your own merit." The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. It was Robert, right on time for his promised visit. He had been flying to Portland every few days, trying to make up for lost time. Today, he carried 4 identical boxes. "I brought something for each of you," he said, his voice betraying his nervousness. He still wasn't quite sure how to be a father, but he was trying his best. The children opened their boxes to find sleek new laptops, the latest model from Chen Technologies, not yet available to the public. But underneath each laptop was something more personal. For Amy, he had found a copy of the business plan he wrote at her age. For the twins, he included his first programming notebook filled with handwritten code. And for Peter, there was a journal containing his earliest sketches of renewable energy systems. "I thought you might like to see where some of your interests came from," Robert explained, "though you've already taken them so much further than I did at your age." The gifts sparked a long conversation about their shared passions and talents. Robert listened in amazement as the twins explained their latest coding project, recognizing his own thought patterns in their approach. Amy showed him her detailed plans for a school recycling program, and he saw his entrepreneurial spirit shine through. Peter quietly shared his ideas about improving their science fair project, displaying the same innovative thinking that had built Robert's empire. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. During dinner, David suddenly asked, "Why did you leave, Mom? Why didn't you try harder to make it work?" The question hung heavy in the air. Robert put down his fork, knowing he owed them honesty. "I was young and foolish," he admitted. "I thought success meant having the biggest company, the most money, the greatest influence. I didn't understand that real success is about the people you love and who love you back." "And now?" Peter's quiet voice carried across the table. "Now I know what I missed," Robert replied, looking at each of them. "And I'd give up every dollar I have to go back and make a different choice. But since I can't do that, all I can do is try to be here for you now, if you'll let me." Later that evening, as Robert prepared to leave for his hotel, Lily found him staring at the family photos on the wall. There were so many moments he had missed. First steps, first words, first days of school. "They're amazing, Lily," he said softly. "You did an incredible job raising them." "They are amazing," she agreed. "And they're handling this whole situation better than most adults would." "I want to be part of their lives," Robert said. "Really part of it, not just flying in with gifts and flying out again. I'm thinking of opening a West Coast office here in Portland." Lily looked at him carefully. "They're not a business project, Robert. You can't just throw money and resources at this and expect immediate results. Building relationships takes time and patience." "I know," he nodded. "I'm not trying to buy their love. I just want to be here, to be present, to learn who they are and maybe help them become who they want to be." From the living room came the sound of laughter. The children were looking through old family albums, discovering more similarities between themselves and their father. They had their mother's kindness and their father's drive, their mother's wisdom and their father's vision. They were the best of both parents, even though they had only known one of them until now. As Robert left that night, he felt both heartbroken and hopeful. He had missed 12 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and proud moments. But maybe, just maybe, he hadn't missed his chance to be a father. The children were giving him an opportunity he knew he didn't deserve, and he was determined not to waste it. Back in his hotel room, Robert made a decision. Success had always been about the future for him, the next big innovation, the next market to conquer. But now, for the first time, he understood that sometimes the biggest achievements in life had nothing to do with business at all. They were about family, about love, about being there for the people who matter most. 3 months had passed since the science fair revelation, and summer was in full swing in Portland. Robert had kept his word about being present, having rented a house just 10 minutes away from his family. The transition wasn't easy, but he was learning that being a father was the most challenging and rewarding project he'd ever undertaken. One sunny morning, Robert arrived at the children's house for what had become their weekly family breakfast. He found Amy sitting on the front porch, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a troubled expression. "Everything okay?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "I saw an article about you online," she said quietly. "About how you are the absent billionaire father. They're calling us your secret family." Robert's heart sank. Despite their best efforts to keep things private, the media had eventually caught wind of the story. He had hoped to protect the children from this side of his life a little longer. Inside, the rest of the family was already gathering around the kitchen table. Daniel was showing Lily his latest computer program, while David and Peter worked on a new science project. But there was tension in the air. They had all seen the articles. "We need to talk about this," Lily said as Robert and Amy joined them. "The media attention isn't going to go away, and you all need to be prepared." "I don't want to be known as the billionaire's kid," David burst out. At school yesterday, someone asked if I could buy them a car. They weren't even joking. Daniel nodded in agreement. And our coding club teacher keeps asking if we're going to get special internships at Chen Technologies now. Peter, who had been quietly listening, added, "Our science fair win doesn't feel like our own achievement anymore. Everyone says we won because of Dad." Robert listened to their concerns, feeling the weight of his wealth and fame impacting their lives in ways he hadn't anticipated. These were challenges he knew how to handle for himself, but protecting his children from them was different. "I've made some mistakes in handling this situation," Robert admitted. "I was so focused on getting to know you that I didn't think enough about how my public life would affect yours, but we can figure this out together." Lily reached for the fresh bread she'd baked, a Sunday tradition that hadn't changed despite their new circumstances. "Maybe," she suggested, "we should let the children decide how they want to handle this." Amy straightened up, her natural leadership emerging. "I think we should tell our own story," she said, "not let others tell it for us." "What do you mean?" Robert asked, genuinely curious. "Well," Amy continued, "right now, everyone's making up stories about us, but they don't know the real story, how Mom raised us to work hard and earn things for ourselves, how we won that science competition because we spent months developing our project, how we're just a normal family trying to figure things out." The twins exchanged one of their telepathic looks. "We could start a blog," Daniel suggested, "about kids in science and technology. Not about being rich or famous, but about the work we're actually doing. And we could show other kids that it's okay to be smart and work hard," David added. "That success comes from effort, not just from who your parents are." Peter, who had been drawing in his notebook, looked up. "We could share our sustainable energy ideas, help other kids develop their own projects." Robert watched in amazement as his children transformed a crisis into an opportunity. They hadn't asked for money or for him to fix things. They wanted to handle it themselves in their own way. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I'll support you. But I also want you to know that you don't have to be public figures if you don't want to be. You can still have a private life." Lily smiled at her children's resilience. "You've always been a team," she reminded them. "That doesn't have to change just because circumstances have." Over breakfast, they discussed boundaries and solutions. The children talked about what they were comfortable sharing and what they wanted to keep private. Robert shared his experiences dealing with public attention, while Lily helped them think through the practical implications of their choices. Later that day, Robert found himself in the backyard with Peter, working on an improved version of their science fair project. David and Daniel were upstairs, creating a website that would showcase young scientists' work, while Amy drafted guidelines for their new online platform. "Dad," Peter said suddenly, looking up from their work, "I used to be angry that you weren't around, but now I think maybe it happened the way it was supposed to. We learned who we are without your name or your money, and now we can choose who we want to become." Robert felt tears prick at his eyes. "You're wise beyond your years, you know that?" "Mom says I get that from her side," Peter grinned, and for the first time, Robert saw a playful side to his most serious child. Inside, Lily watched through the kitchen window as father and son worked together. The past few months had been a journey of adjustment for everyone. There had been tears, arguments, and moments of doubt. But there had also been laughter, discovery, and growing understanding. The media would eventually move on to other stories, but the bonds being formed in this family would last. They were learning that being a family wasn't about perfect solutions or avoiding problems. It was about facing challenges together and growing stronger through them. As the sun began to set, Robert looked around at his children, each absorbed in their own projects, but all working toward a common goal. He had spent years building a technology empire, but only now did he understand what real achievement felt like. It wasn't in the patents or the profit margins. It was in these moments, watching his children grow into remarkable people who could face life's challenges with grace and determination. 1 year had passed since the life-changing science fair. The seasons had cycled through, bringing with them new challenges and victories, tears and laughter, and most importantly, growth. The Chen Wu family had found their rhythm, different from before, but somehow richer, more complete. On a crisp autumn morning, 13-year-old Amy stood in front of her middle school auditorium, preparing to give a presentation. But this wasn't just any presentation. She was speaking about the family's journey at a special assembly about young achievers. In the audience sat her siblings, her mother, and her father, all there to support her. "A year ago," Annie began, her voice clear and confident, "my siblings and I thought we knew exactly who we were. Then everything changed. We learned that our father was Robert Chen, the tech billionaire. But that's not the interesting part of our story." Robert watched from his seat, remembering how far they'd come. Their children's science and technology blog had become a huge success, inspiring young minds across the country. But more importantly, they had built something that money couldn't buy: real family bonds. "The interesting part," Andy continued, "is what we learned about success. Real success isn't about having a famous name or lots of money. It's about working hard, being true to yourself, and having people who believe in you." The twins sat in the audience, occasionally finishing each other's whispered comments as their sister spoke. Their coding workshop for kids had taken off, teaching young programmers that creativity matters more than expensive equipment. They had inherited their father's technical brilliance but combined it with their mother's gift for teaching. Peter, still the quietest of the four, had his notebook open, but he wasn't taking notes. Instead, he was sketching improvements to their latest family project: a network of small-scale sustainable energy systems for schools in low-income areas. It combined Robert's business sense with Lily's dedication to education and all four children's innovative thinking. "Our mom taught us that success comes from who you are, not what you have." Amy's voice carried through the auditorium. "And our dad taught us that it's never too late to learn what really matters." Lily reached over and squeezed Robert's hand. They weren't together romantically. That chapter had closed long ago, but they had found a way to be partners in the most important project of all: raising their children. After the assembly, the family gathered at their favorite local pizza place. It had become their tradition to celebrate achievements here, choosing this casual setting over fancy restaurants. Robert, who once only ate at five-star establishments, now claimed this place had the best pizza he ever tasted. "You know what's funny?" David said between bites. "Remember how worried we were about people treating us differently because of Dad? Now most of my friends don't even think about it anymore." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, they're more interested in our coding club than Dad's company, though they still think it's cool that we get to test new tech before anyone else." Speaking of new tech, Robert smiled. "How's the mentorship program going?" The children had started a program matching experienced young scientists and programmers with beginners. It had been their way of paying forward the support they'd received, and it had grown beyond their expectations. "We're expanding to 5 new schools next month," Annie reported proudly. "And Peter's environmental science group is joining forces with us." Peter looked up from his notebook. "We're calling it Future Builders, because it's not just about building technology, it's about building a better future." Lily watched her children with pride. They had handled their sudden fame with grace, using their platform to help others rather than seeking attention for themselves. The media had eventually lost interest in the billionaire's secret family story, but by then, the children had created their own positive narrative. "I have something to tell you all," Robert said as they finished their meal. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about the future of Chen Technologies." The children looked at him curiously. Over the past year, they had learned a lot about their father's company, occasionally visiting the Portland office he had opened to be near them. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations," he announced. "I'll still be involved in major decisions, but I'm appointing a new CEO to handle the business side of things." "But you love running the company," Emmy said, surprised. "It's your life's work." Robert smiled at his daughter. "It was my life's work. But now I have something more important to focus on. I want to be here for your science fairs, your coding competitions, your environmental projects. I've missed enough of your lives already." "Does this mean you'll help coach our robotics team?" Daniel asked hopefully. "And maybe come camping with us?" David added. "We're planning an expedition to test our solar equipment in the wild." "I'd like that," Robert replied, looking at Lily for approval. She nodded, smiling. They had all learned to balance the different parts of their lives. Later that evening, as the family walked home under the streetlights, Peter fell into step beside his father. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "a year ago, I used to wonder why you left. Now I wonder if everything happened exactly as it needed to." "What do you mean?" Robert asked. "Well, if you had stayed, we might have grown up differently. Maybe we wouldn't have learned the same values or developed the same drive to prove ourselves. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the best destinations." Robert looked at his son in amazement. Then he looked at all his children, Emmy leading the way, the twins engaged in animated discussion, Peter walking quietly beside him, and at Lily, who had raised them to be such remarkable people. "You're right," he said softly. "Sometimes life's biggest mistakes can lead to its greatest gifts. The trick is recognizing them when they come around again." As they reached home, the autumn leaves crunched under their feet, and the porch light welcomed them back. It wasn't the massive penthouse where Robert had once lived, or even a mansion that he could easily afford now. It was something far more valuable, a real home, filled with love, learning, and second chances. The story of the billionaire who left his wife only to discover his 4 children years later had become something else entirely. It had become a story about finding success not in wealth or fame, but in the connections we build, the differences we make, and the love we share. It was a story still being written, one day at a time, by a family who had learned that life's greatest riches couldn't be measured in dollars and cents.